Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar. My name is Rachel Howell and I'm one of Physics World's webinar moderators. Welcome to today's webinar, Monitor Your Comprehensive MRI Performance with the QUASAR MRgRT Insight Phantom. Before we start, I will just go over a few items of housekeeping so you know how to participate in today's event. You will have joined us listening using your computer's speaker system by default. But if you would prefer to join over the telephone, select telephone in the audio pane of your control panel and the dial-in information will be displayed. You can submit text questions to today's presenter by typing them into the questions pane, which you will again find in your control panel. Today's webinar is presented by Joanne Tang from Modus QA, who welcomes your questions as part of this webinar, so please do send them in at any time during today's presentation using that questions facility, and she will answer as many as possible during the Q&A session which will follow her presentation. Any questions that we don't have time to answer today, she will endeavour to answer by email after the webinar. So I will now hand over to Joanne.
Thank you everyone for attending this webinar on monitoring your comprehensive MRI performance with the QUASAR MRgRT Insight Phantom. And just so you have a face to actually put towards this embodied voice, I'm Joanne and I'm the application specialist at Modus QA. So previous to this position, I actually completed my Master's of Science in Medical Biophysics at the University of Western Ontario, where my focus was mostly on the application of multimodality imaging in neurological and cardiovascular systems. Currently, I'm a bit more focused towards clinical applications, customer communications, as well as the sales and marketing aspects for all the QUASAR products at Modus. Before we begin, just in case we have some new faces in the audience who might not be as familiar with Modus QA, I did want to provide a quick background about us. So we are a facility that's located in London, Canada, and we specialize in the manufacturing of high-quality QA phantoms for advanced radiotherapy and medical imaging. And so having been in the business for over 2 decades now, we currently have over 6,000 QUASAR phantoms in use around the world at over 3,000 different treatment centers. And in more recent news, just earlier this year, we officially joined the IBA dosimetry family, enabling us to really expand the future possibilities for our customers in both the medical imaging and radiotherapy QA. And so, with our team's combined knowledge and passions, we will continue to deliver the critical QA tools and software needed to ensure the best care and the best possible outcomes for patients. And so, speaking of the actual QA tools, on the screen you actually see a small subset of our products, to which some of you may recognize. And divided into categories, the Modus product catalog does span quite a variety of QA solutions, which includes targeting, geometric accuracy, motion management, 3D gel dosimetry, and of course MRI QA solutions, which is going to be the topic of this webinar today. And so, just taking a quick look at our itinerary today, within this webinar, we will first be going through a quick overview of MRgRT QA, where we will briefly touch upon MRI in radiation therapy, and with it, the considerations associated with the MRgRT QA process. Thereafter, we will move on to the actual QUASAR MRgRT Insight Phantom itself, focusing primarily on Phantom design as well as its key features. Thereafter, we will dive into our automated software platforms, which works in tandem with the Phantom to provide fast and efficient, but still high-quality performance metrics about your MRI system. Lastly, we will conclude our time together today with a demonstration of this software suite so you can see firsthand its functionality. And so, let's begin. Over the past few decades, the installation and use of MRI has become increasingly prevalent within clinics. Taking advantage of its superior soft tissue contrast and lack of ionizing radiation, MRI has been increasingly incorporated into numerous steps of the radiation therapy planning and delivery workflow, where it is slowly becoming a standard of care for IGRT. Now, this is in part due to physicists now being able to more accurately delineate targets and organ at risk, thereby allowing you to escalate doses while still minimizing treatment-related toxicities, leading to, of course, better patient outcomes. Now, notably, the number of MR-SIMs and more recently MR-Linac installations are a testament to this, to the importance of MRI in the future of radiation therapy as interest in the MRgRT process grows. However, MRI, like all imaging modalities, is not without its faults. For instance, the quality of the treatment and adaptation in MR-guided radiation therapy is heavily dependent on the accuracy, resolution, and general imaging performance of the MR system in question, especially in cases of real-time adaptive MRgRT or even sites using MR-only planning. And so matters such as accurate MRI localization, slice thickness, distortion correction, uniformity, spatial resolution, and many other parameters are highly recommended to be assessed on a monthly, if not daily basis, as prescribed by the WAPM task groups. And so this is particularly notable in the peripheral regions of the imaging field of view, distances away actually from the isocenter, as several of those requirements that I stated before are largely complicated by magnetic field inhomogeneities and gradient nonlinearities. And so there is a need to consistently perform quality assurance and quality control tests on the MR system in use. However, it should be noted that although there are several image quality, geometric integrity, or even alignment phantoms that does aid in the QA of these matters, many of them are highly specialized for a single or a limited number of tests, or they're limited in size, having a much smaller phantom volume than the actual imaging system's FOV. And so this will ultimately require the physicist to take multiple acquisitions while consistently moving the phantom around to different locations on the table, all in order to just gather one complete dataset, making monthly, let alone daily QA understandably cumbersome, as it takes away valuable scanning time from both the patients, but also extends after-hour QA for the physicist. With this ongoing issue in mind, this is the QUASAR MRgRT Insight Phantom, which is our newly released time-saving quality assurance device that's designed to test image quality and machine targeting on your MR Sim and MR Linac. The intention behind the Insight Phantom is actually for physicists to capture a deeper understanding of the MRgRT system's comprehensive performance and systems integrity, but in a far more efficient manner, as it can enable you to actually complete the majority of your daily or periodic QA testing in just a single 5-minute acquisition. Now that is admittedly a bold statement to make, and you may be wondering, how does the Phantom do this? Well, let's go through the Insight Phantom's design step by step. So anatomically, the Insight Phantom is a large field of view acrylic phantom with an imaging FOV at 400 millimeters, and within it, it has several built-in image quality, distortion, and machine targeting structures that lie all within just the base Phantom system. And just to list some of these structures off, we have laser landmark targets and phantom alignment channels, a uniform flood field to evaluate uniformity, several line pair wedges to calculate the modulation transfer function for spatial resolution, as well as several slice thickness ramps to calculate slice thickness. There is a grid for large FOV geometric distortion evaluation, and amongst several other options for end-to-end symmetry accessories, which we can touch upon later. And so since all these testing features are located within just one singular phantom, it's actually quite feasible to complete a majority of your daily or periodic QA testing with just a single comprehensive scan, thereby receiving a full understanding of the integrity of your MR system in a far more efficient manner in just one single acquisition. And to supplement this, each of those structures are also filled with a highly contrastive MR contrast solution, which significantly enhances the Phantom's image resolution during scanning, and thereby making the internal GD grid, the landmarking options, all far easier to visualize and thereby analyze. And this is occurring even at low-strength magnet systems at 0.35 T. And just to supplement this, so far we have validated that this Phantom does perform well on dedicated MRI systems from the 0.35 T all the way to 3 Teslas. In addition, the Phantom also consists of 2 movable sections, the base plate, which is this lower portion here, as well as the upright, which I will likely be referring to a lot during the remainder of this presentation. And this functionality is mostly to provide you with detailed image quality metrics in all 3 coordinate planes. This is occurring because the upright here can actually be moved into an axial orientation, which provides you all the necessary performance metrics across the axial plane, or you can rotate it 90 degrees this way to record sagittal information. Likewise, baseplates will also provide you with any coronal data, as all the image quality structures found in the upright are equally built into the baseplate here as well. And so, knowing these phantom attributes, what does it really mean for physicists and your QA procedures? Well, as listed previously, the Insight Phantom incorporates a rather large field of view of 400 mm that encompasses the majority of the treatment field as prescribed by the AAPM TG284 task group. This allows physicists to monitor key imaging QA parameters over a FOV that's actually suitable for a wider range of RT applications, including not only small field of view SRS cases, but also treatment of larger field of view SBRT applications, such as, let's say, the treatment of the abdominal thoracic regions. And so typically for these sorts of large FOV cases, smaller volume phantoms will require a lengthier QA process because the physicist would be required to repeatedly reposition the small phantom at multiple areas on the table, and then consecutively scanning those phantoms 6 or 8 times in order to cover the same treatment FOV, as opposed to the Insight Phantom's one-time positioning, single acquisition process, which may likely greatly expedite the QA workflow. And within that large FOV, as touched upon before, there are several imaging structures and features embedded into the phantom in both the upright and the baseplate, thus allowing physicists to perform a vast range of quality assurance tests across all 3 imaging orthogonal planes, the axial, sagittal, and coronal spaces, be it for daily QA or periodic or annual QC requirements. The list of unique tests displayed on the screen right now is actually a testament to this. And just to list off a few, you can firstly validate the laser and patient table positioning accuracy, as well as imaging laser isocenter alignment via the inscribed alignment channels, as well as using the laser landmark targets. You can also measure for laser landmark constancy and patient table offsets. Additionally, using the MR-MV targets, you can also measure for the MR-MV isocenter coincidence, and there are also several distinct imaging structures for spatial resolution, slice thickness, uniformity via that integrated flood field, as well as the 400 mm geometric distortion grids that are used to calculate the distortion of the entire treatment field. So at this time, I did want to mention that these tests can also be conducted manually by using only the phantom, or it can be automatically analyzed through the Insight software, which I will touch upon more later. And so, continuing on, there is also the option to evaluate if your phased array coil is functioning correctly by performing a uniformity test and then selecting multiple ROI locations that are representative of the coil elements being inspected. And lastly, you can also evaluate for ghosting, ferrous content detection, which is recommended by the AAPM to be done daily. And also, if your site has or is interested in the MR-Linac, you can also perform quite a plethora of end-to-end testing using the optional dosimetry accessories that I will also be touching upon later in the next slide. So in addition to monitoring image quality metrics on your MRI, we also offer additional RT accessories that really expand the Phantom's capabilities from a primarily MR imaging Phantom to an end-to-end treatment delivery QA tool on your MR Linacs. So firstly, we have the ion chamber holder as well as a large film cassette. And so this film cassette can actually accommodate for a rather large piece of EBT theory film, and both are available for a variety of targeting and the symmetry test. Interestingly, we also offer this dual ion chamber holder right here, and this can actually hold multiple ion chambers to perform both vertical and horizontal beam uniformity measurements. In addition to the general dosimetry items, we also offer accessories specially designed for your select OEM MR Linac vendors. For example, this indexing feature here can actually be used on both MR SINs as well as the elected unity couches to aid in alignment. The fixture will actually lock into a standard indexing bar and then house the leveling feet of the Insight Phantom base for an easier, more reproducible, and more efficient setup. Meanwhile, for our ViewRay users, we have specially designed a specialized phased array coil bridge to allow for the proper use and ideal positioning of the Meridian's phased array coils over the Phantom. And so this will allow for the Meridian users to really image the phantom in the most clinically relevant fashion while still avoiding placing excess stress on the coils or the connectors. Equally, as these MR-MV targets actually house high-density ceramic spheres that show up rather well on both your MR and onboard imagers, they are not only used for 3D MR-MV registration, but it can also be used to assess the MLC positioning accuracy via the Unity's EPID system. And so, with the accumulation of all those testing features and capabilities, the Insight Phantom can be slotted as an efficient addition or replacement Phantom to any physicist's workflow. This is because the base Phantom does come ready to scan straight out of the box without any additional need to fill up the Phantom with contrast solution, as it has been done so already. And again, it also does not require any additional repositioning of multiple Phantoms as one would expect with smaller FOV Phantoms. And so it is quite conceivable that a physicist familiar with the system can complete setup, scanning, as well as the automated analysis of their MRI's comprehensive system performance using the software all in under 10 minutes, thereby adding efficiency to their daily QA or periodic QA workflows. As I touched upon briefly in the previous slide, included with the system is the QUASAR MRgRT Insight software application that's designed to work in tandem with the physical Phantom to provide a faster, more efficient analysis of the images acquired on your selected MR system. Now, the software suite is a fully automated image analysis software in which it can calculate the image quality metrics on the computer in less than just 1 minute, in which it will spit out the information as either pass, fail, or a warning, depending on what your tolerances are set as. And if the metric is indeed out of tolerance, it will then ping in red to notify you, otherwise it will just remain in green. So this is actually going to be a quick and easy summary of the information, which can be used to help expedite daily morning QA. However, if you want to deeply evaluate the statistics and really fully understand the limits of your MR system, further information about each metric is also provided with the detailed view of all the data. And that includes how it's calculated, all the uncertainties, and this is all going to be listed out in the single series analysis mode. There is also the option to complete all these analyses manually through the manual calculation view, where the software will then walk you through the process step by step. However, we can touch upon that in a little bit more detail during the software demonstration. So these are the metrics that are going to be automatically calculated from the different slices of the imported Phantom diagrams. I will go through these quite quickly, so I'll talk about them again during the software demonstration. But to start, we have uniformity, which is going to be derived from the uniform flood field that's located in the upright, as well as sampling regions in the selected uniform areas in the coronal baseplate. Next to that, we have slice thickness, which is calculated based off the slice thickness ramps, which you can sort of see in the image here. And these are all going to be placed in sets of 2. And all of these ramps are going to be covered with a highly contrastive T1 weighted MRI contrast so that they are very visible on the MR image. In total, there are 10 ramps scattered around each component of the Phantom, meaning there are 10 in the upright, 10 in the baseplate, as to provide information throughout the entire FOV rather than just being a single segment. The software will ultimately detect their locations, measure the gray value fall off on those ramps, and then calculate the nominal slice thickness based off the ramp's slope. There is also spatial resolution, which is calculated as the modulation transfer function from each various imaging zones that are scattered around the entire volume of the upright and the baseplate. So there are 8 in each component, as you can see by these line pair structures right here. And so you'll be able to understand the resolution of the entire treatment field rather than just a specific reason. And I also do want to bring up that for all these 3 metrics that I just mentioned, they're all going to be calculated based off of the IEC 62484 recommendations as to ensure accuracy and also compliance to set standards within the field. And lastly, within the Phantom, there's also the MR contrast field grid for 2D geometric distortion measurements. This is again in both the upright and the baseplate, so you'll be able to do axial, sagittal, and coronal scans as to assess distortion in all 3 orthogonal planes respectively. Lastly, another feature I would like to highlight is the software's trending capabilities. So with each metric, we also have a trending graphical display that will allow you to monitor your system's performance over time. So what that means is that you can basically take the same type of scan repeatedly and then set your tolerances to what is going to be acceptable, as you can see in this bottom graphic right here. And thereby, whenever you're going to be approaching those tolerances, which is that red line, you can then see visually when intervention or further investigation is going to be required. Additionally, there are also interactive 2D or 3D enhanced visualization tools in place in which the physicists can visualize and interact with the imported images and analyze quality metrics. And of course, there's also an option to save and export your analyzed results in a customizable report that can be saved and printed out. The report is going to be easy to interpret to allow for easier communication between physics team members, but also for auditing purposes. And so, with that being said, this brings us to the end of the general overview of the QUASAR MRgRT Phantom, and now let us move on to the software demonstration. So during this portion of the webinar, I'll briefly walk you through the automated software analysis suite from the perspective of a physicist running their system QA after an MR acquisition with the Insight Phantom. And so upon opening the software, you're going to be greeted with this initial view here. And just to orient ourselves a little, the window is going to be split up into two components. The top panel, which is where all your system performance information is actually going to be displayed, and this is going to be controlled by the view navigation buttons that's located along your left-hand side, as well as the bottom panel here, which is going to be filled with the data browser. So this is where all of your acquired image series are going to be stored and then later processed. Now you can easily filter and sort them based off the series name, the date of acquisition, the orientation applied by simply right-clicking here and then seeing all the filters being displayed. And this can help you try to figure out which of those image series that you prefer to analyze. However, in order to actually begin the data analysis process, we want to first retrieve our DICOM images and then import them into the software. Now, this is actually quite a straightforward process, as you can import them simply by clicking on this button towards your left-hand side and directly selecting your DICOM folder, or optionally, you can also open up your Files Explorer and then afterwards drag and drop your folder of DICOMs into either the main window or into the data browser below. So optionally, there is also an opportunity for you to directly retrieve your files from a PAX server, and this will be the PAX view in which you can do this. Unfortunately, I don't have a server right now to actually connect to in order to demo this, but essentially this is the view you would use to connect to a local DICOM server in order to pull your data in. So right now I am going to go back to our passive view and then give this a try using one of our data sets. So here I'm going to take our DICOM folder and directly drag it into the folder below. As you can see, it's going to be pulled in and it is going to be uploaded into our servers. Once it is pulled in, it is configured to be processed automatically such that your system's images are analyzed through a fully automated process. However, you are also privy to simply selecting the series from the data browser and then afterwards clicking this process button right here in order to start and trigger the analyses. And so when that data is fully automated and fully processed, it's going to be populating it directly into this different view here. And here, the first page we have is the pass or fail view, which essentially is a really fast and quick way to tell you if your performance metrics are within acceptable tolerances in a really efficient manner. Here displayed, we have the series name, as well as all the different tests that were run based off your imported MR images. And that can include the phantom alignment, uniformity, slice thickness, spatial resolution, as well as geometric distortion. And all the results are going to be color-coded as a pass or fail verdict. Now, towards your right-hand side here, all the details of the test, as well as the thresholds, are going to be listed. And of course, all these tolerances are completely customized and changeable in the settings view to whichever limits best suit your clinic. So right now I have a bunch of them listed out for all of these measurements, and these results are compared to these thresholds in order to pertain these pass or fail results. And so if you and your team really do want a really simple and quick pass or fail method of analyzing your system's performance on a daily basis or just as a simple check, this view is probably all you need. However, if you wish to really see and dive into the details of all the series, you can actually click on this button right here in order to enter the next tab, which is going to be our single series view. And so the single series view is actually designed to display all the performance metric data associated with a single acquisition set selected, which is named at the top here. And using the buttons located on the right-hand side, you can actually toggle between the different test results. So the first that we're going to be tackling is the phantom alignment test. And here, the software is detecting the position of the phantom. And within this visualizer, you're essentially shown the center of the phantom and where it's being detected, as depicted by the blue crosshair in the center, as well as the twist angle in the plane. The amount of deviation is also going to be reported quantitatively, with the color being pinged in red upon being set out of tolerance. The next view is uniformity. And so this is going to be calculated based off the large 400mm flood field that's located in both the upright section of the phantom, as well as select uniform regions in the coronal baseplate. So uniformity in this section is automatically calculated based off the IEC 62484 prescribed recommendations. And you'll be able to get this information, such as the ROI size, which is essentially how much does the selected ROI cover in the phantom, the uniformity calculation, as well as the SNR, all within this view. Next up, we have our slice thickness measurements. And so within the phantom, there are 10 of these slice thickness ramp widgets that are used to calculate the slice thickness. The ramps are going to be scattered around the phantom in both the upright as well as the coronal baseplate, and they can be used to denotate and measure where the gray values fall off the ramp. And using this information, the software will automatically calculate and provide you the nominal slice thickness value as well as the noise STD. However, one thing I do want to note about this view is that you're also able to retrieve the zone-specific statistics that we actually use to calculate the stats by simply selecting one of these zones right here. So sort of like this. And so by clicking on that button, you're actually going to be able to access all the actual raw rim profiles, the adjusted one, the hybrid, as well as a gradient profile. And so rather than having a sort of black box of a software where it just spits out a slice thickness information and it's done, you're able to retrieve all this information and do self-validation as well. And so if you are concerned about a certain result and really wish to further investigate, you're able to access all of this information with a click of a button. And so the following page I have is dedicated to spatial resolution. And so within the Phantom, we actually have these sorts of line pair imaging zones where the spatial resolution is calculated as the modulation transfer function in each of these zones. So there are 8 in total scattered around the Phantom, and so that you'll be able to understand the spatial resolution throughout the entire 40 centimeter volume rather than just add a specific zone here. And like before, if you want to take a closer look at each line pairing zone, you can simply click on the designated zone name. It's going to zoom in and take a look at the actual line pairs. So last up, we have the distortion grid. And so for those of you familiar with our large FOV 3D geometric distortion phantom, the MRI 3D, this is a slightly different evaluation technique as it depends on an actual distortion grid rather than our more higher tech system. But there is a specialized high MR contrast medium field grid within the phantom that will yield us these 2D geometric distortion measurements. So that is located in both the upright and the base plane. So you can do axial, sagittal, and coronal scans to assess distortion in all 3 of the planes respectively. There is also an option to view a heat map of where your distortion is occurring, or optionally, you can also see this as a scatter plot, depending on your interest. And of course, all this information can be exported as a .csv file for all of your own use. So right now, this is going to be displaying your absolute distortion. You can also see it in the X and Y axes as well. It should also be noted that there are various overlays that can be added onto the grid display. And so the first one here, if I unselect all of these, are going to be showing you the different data of the control points. The second one is going to be showing the different radii for calculating distortion. So there is 210, 310, and 410 millimeters, as well as the whole phantom, as correlating with the actual distortion statistics chart on your left-hand side. The third and the fourth will be showing the original control points, as well as the actual detected locations of the control points. However, this can be relatively difficult to see unless there are really high cases of distortion. And lastly, we also have the different ISO centers here, and these are just going to be ISO contours of distortion. And we can see that there are limits of 0.75, 1.0, as well as 0.25 millimeters in order to indicate where your distortion is located. So essentially, this software will detect all the internal as well as the outer intersections, and then afterwards calculate the deviation away from the expected positions of those control points. But the general idea behind the Phantom is that I'll give you a snapshot of what distortion is like within your scanner in a simple 2D slice. And so it's more so like a fast IEC recommended glance of your system, so you can just quickly check your geometric distortion. However, if there is something wrong with your system's distortion, then you'll likely need something a little bit more robust to further evaluate that in 3D, like the MRI 3D. And so you can really think of the Insight Phantom as something that can trigger investigation and interventional action or service for physicists if it's out of tolerance. And so while we are still on this view, I did want to point out a trending feature that is associated with every single one of these metrics in the software. So by clicking on that button right here, you will display the trending feature. And so this essentially allows you to see longitudinally the performance of your MR system across several scans, across different dates, in a set different time period. So what that really means is that if you acquire the same type of scan repeatedly every day or every so often, the software is going to be able to compile those statistics and then graph them on a chart over time. So this might be particularly useful to you as you'll be able to set tolerances on what is acceptable. So here I have set it as 2 millimeters of distortion as indicated by the red line. Of course, this is just an example. So if your data is approaching those tolerances or deviating away from it, you can see when it is best to trigger an investigation. And so with that being said, this does conclude our peer into the results view of the software. And we can move on to the next view. So just jumping ahead a little bit, the Insight software also does have a modular page where the physicists can perform all these measurements that we saw in the single series view manually. So if the physicist suspects that there is an error or perhaps during calculation a feature was missed and they really want to cross-reference their own calculations with what is being automatically generated in the single series view, you also have the ability to override that automation and then perform the test on your own. So for example, I have a series selected here with a generated image from the scan, and by just clicking on that play button here and the arrows, I can toggle between what's going on. So above here is going to be a set of instructions that will help guide you through the manual operation process step by step. So as you can see, it's going to trigger me to recalculate all the existing models, and just flipping through, it's going to go through all the manual analyses. And so once that is complete, you can press the stop button. It's going to save all your data as a manual operation. And so if I were to go back to the single series view and I press this button right here, I can actually toggle between whether I am seeing my data as an automatically generated system or something in the manual. So next up, we actually have the 3D viewer. And so this is a image that allows the users to visualize the phantom, the ROI, and the different slices used for each test in this interactive visualizer. And so you can easily toggle between what is detected as the relevant slices for each test using these sorts of quick link buttons located at the top. And these slices are going to be detected automatically by the software to perform the calculations we saw in the single series view. However, here you'll be able to visualize them in the 3D viewer. So this is going to be your phantom alignment view, as seen in the center. You have the uniform flood field. Next up, you also have the spatial resolution as well as image quality. And these two views are going to be the same because their features are on the same plane. And lastly, we also have the geometric distortion grid. And so within this space, you are also privy to moving the slice around. So for example, like this, you can also rotate it. You can drag it through the different planes to see different slices and such. You can zoom in and out by just simply adjusting your mouse, and you can also adjust the window balance as well. So there are many series of properties to explore within this view, and it's definitely a good time to play around with. So lastly, we have the reporting view. And so upon actually completing your analyses, the physicist is able to export all, or depending on your preferences, a subsegment of data seen in the previous views in a report. So this will bring us to the reporting view, and it will provide the end user with a concise, streamlined way to export your system performance metrics in a customized PDF that could be saved or printed out for your records. And depending on what is needed for your site, there is also an option to include all the statistics that we saw before in it. You can see the different slices of the test. You can see the different overlays that we've shown before on each image. This can all be generated by simply clicking on this booklet icon. And it's going to generate a PDF that looks very similar to, if I pull this up right now, it's going to look something very similar to this. And so scrolling down, we can see at the first slide, we have an acquisition summary. It's going to give us all our phantom alignment data, as well as the pass or fail results, as well as the statistics that we saw in the single series view. It can also show us the image slice of what we saw before as well. And so moving on from the reporting view, we will then jump ahead to the settings view, which is going to be the final view within the software. And so just like its namesake, it does allow you to change the settings and the parameter of the software. So notably, you are able to adjust the default threshold settings, which denotes the limits of what categorizes as us passing or failing to meet the standard of each test. And of course, this will include your phantom positioning, your uniformity, your slice thickness, spatial resolution, as well as your geometric distortion. So jumping back to the actual phantom positioning, there is an additional feature that I do want to point out, which is this enable Y offset box right here. So this attribute was actually designed for beds that were unable to be placing the phantom exactly at the isocenter. So for example, if you recognize and you already know that your bed's always, and well as the phantom is always going to sit, let's say 2 millimeters too high, according to the isocenter. So in a situation like this where you don't want to be continuously flagged about it being a fail due to this slight 2 millimeter offset, you can actually enable this button right here, and the software would take that offset into consideration during their analyses. Now, there are also many other different customization options, which includes which sort of colors that you want to display as a pass or fail. Let's say you think red is too much, you can change it into a pink or so. Or let's say you can change the scale of your heat maps. You can change your image storage and backup folder locations, etc. However, for the sake of brevity, some of the features I'm not going to be touched on during this demonstration, so I do encourage any interested or current users to contact us at any time for software inquiries. We are more than happy to help. And so, with that being said, this does conclude our software demonstration of the MRgRT Insight Phantom. So I appreciate your time and thank you very much for attending this Monitor Your Comprehensive MRI Performance with the QUASAR MRgRT Insight Phantom webinar. For more information about the QUASAR MRgRT Insight or any of our other quality assurance options, please contact us at www.modusqa.com, and I look forward to hearing from you and discussing our QA options. And now let's open the floor to questions.
Thanks, Joanne, for a great presentation there. We'll now take a look at some of the questions that have been sent in. As a reminder, you still can submit these through the questions pane. So our first question, can this Phantom only be used for MR sims?
All right, well, thank you for the question. So while the Insight Phantom can be used for MR simulators, its true versatility really lies in the optional accessories that we touched on briefly before. So the ion chamber holders, the 2D dosimetry film cassettes, the the laser alignment targets, the MRMV targets, and all the others. And those actually will allow you to convert the Insight Phantom from just your monitoring day-to-day image quality metrics to the full-blown end-to-end treatment planning and delivery QA device on your actual MR Linux. And with that in mind, I'd rather you think of it as more of a multi-purpose tool for not only MRgRT systems like your MR Sims or your MR Linux, but really for any type of MR planning or just general MR applications that require a high degree of spatial and geometric fidelity. So any sorts of SRR treatments, MR guided biopsies, and others of that sort might be of interesting applications for the Insight Phantom.
Thanks very much. Our next question from this participant says, I currently use your 3D geometric distortion Phantom. What's the difference between the Insight and the one I currently have?
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the question. And just so we're all on the same page and everyone in the audience, our distortion phantom is the QUASAR MRID 3D, and that is our large field of view hollow boundary phantom, and that can be used to assess geometric distortion in 3 dimensions, hence the name. And there are quite a few differences between that one and this current Insight, despite both being able to characterize distortion. The first is that the MRID 3D Phantom is a highly specialized phantom. It's really designed for, first and foremost, a highly precise sub-millimeter accuracy 3D geometric distortion assessment for the majority of your treatment field. It uses a really innovative and proven distortion detection method that when you actually pair it up with the software, allow you to not only assess your entire system's overall distortion, but it can also allow you to quantify and separate out your B0 and GNL distortion as well. So that makes it equally useful for commissioning and periodic system checks, as well as if you wanted to do any optimizing of your scan sequences or maybe biomarker MR imaging such as DWI or DTI, as we know they can both be greatly affected by the GNL. And in addition to those, there are a couple of minor additional tests that you can perform with the MRID 3D. Let's say if you want to check if there's any discrepancies in phantom alignment, you can do that. So knowing that, you can also QA your laser or couch alignment. And also for ferrous content detection as well, if you want to check if there's any metal parts in the actual bore. But overall, the true aim of the MRID 3D is 3D geometric distortion assessment. On the other hand of this, the MRgRT Phantom, which was the topic of our talk today, allows you to really assess your system's GD as sort of a part of a series of tests that you can perform during QA. So what I mean by that is not only are you going to be assessing your distortion, but you can also assess for your image quality, your spatial resolution, your slice thickness, all at the same time. But the caveat to this is that the Insight will yield 2D distortion measurements. And so while I've said before, you can acquire this information in all 3 of those orthogonal planes. So you'll be receiving your distortion metrics in your axial, your coronal, and your sagittal space. it's technically still not a true 3D representation of your system's distortion as you would acquire with the MRI 3D. So in the summary to my long spew, I'll really tell physicists to think of it like this, that the insight is there to provide you as a snapshot of what your distortion and as well as other metrics are within your scanner using those 2D slices. And so you can think of it more so as like a fast IEC recommended glance of your system just to check your GD during your morning QA. It looks great and you're done. But if there's actually something wrong with your system's distortion that you've seen, and you would likely need something a little bit more robust to further evaluate that in the 3D. And that is where your MRI 3D will come in. So basically, Insight is a tool that can help be used to trigger investigations and interventionist actions and services if it's in finding out whether or not your GD is out of tolerance. And then afterwards, you can use your MRI 3D for the actual investigative process part. I hope that helps answer it.
Yes, great, thank you. Our next question, is it possible to use only the upright section of the Phantom, so without the base plate, for axial scanning? This participant would like their technicians to perform a quick daily scan and do not need the bottom portion.
Okay. So once again, thank you for the question. And yeah, you can definitely use just the upright or just the coronal base plate for a quick and easy setup and a daily scan. There's no commitment in needing to utilize every single test feature or accessory that comes with it or that you've purchased. Actually, in fact of that, our team is actually working and in the process of designing even easier and more cost-effective version of the Insight Phantom. And with that one, it'll include a simpler height adjustment indexing base plate, and you can actually use that for just axial imaging only. And so that might be of interest for customers such as yourself who are interested in an even simpler and more straightforward workflow and only require the axial imaging portion of it.
Perfect, thank you very much. Our next question, what type of ion chamber is compatible with this Phantom? What would you recommend?
Oh yeah, so for the symmetry portion of it, so what Modus does for ion chambers is that we actually drill them for their specific dimensions straight into the actual ion chamber insert. And so when you're actually ordering the Insight Solo or dual ion chamber holder, we're going to be asking the physicist to provide information in regards to which ion chambers they currently want to use with the setup or they have at their site. And upon receiving that information, we're going to note down what it is and then take that specific ion chamber's dimensions and drawings, no matter which company you use, and then use those to drill the ion chamber opening into the holder to those exact specifications. And from our experience with different users in the past and such, not only with the Insight, but all of our other products, we haven't really faced any ion chambers that we couldn't drill or fit in so far. But yeah, in summary, if you have a specific ion chamber you want to use with the Insight or the insert, from our experience, it's likely compatible and you don't have to worry about that. So hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. William's question, can Insight be used for geometric distortion?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So like I said during the presentation, inside both the upright as well as the coronal base plate, there is excuse me, MR contrast filled grid for 2D geometric distortion measurements. And again, since it's both in the upright and the base plate, you can do that in axial, sagittal, and coronal scans. So you can assess your distortion in all three of those orthogonal planes, respectively.
Great, thank you. Regarding the film insert, what is the purpose for the film in this case? What about the film analysis and calibration? Does your software have an option to calibrate and analyze the film? Sorry, that's a several-part question.
So good. I love several part questions. So for the film cassette insert, as I said, it's an accessory that comes with that you can purchase with the Insight Phantom. And what it's there for is that it might be useful for any sort of physicists who want to perform 2D dosimetry checks on their MR-Linac. So essentially, it's a blank film cassette, and then that can fit a relatively large single piece of EBT3 film. Off the top of my head, it should measure 70 millimeters by 175 millimeters. And there is also a solid spherical target that's located at the center of it. So you can potentially fire your beam at it and then check if your treatment plan is being delivered as you wanted it to be. We don't currently offer any actual film analyzing services at Modus. We are only here to really provide you the tools that you can perform the test with. So usually it's there to help you perform those 2D dosimetry checks if you're interested in film.
Thanks very much. Megan's question, will the Phantom inserts be visible and provide meaningful results for analysis using our standard TRUFI planning sequence on our ViewRay meridian?
Oh yeah, the meridian, yes. So we have actually validated the Phantom on the ViewRay meridian along with several other of the MR-Linacs. And in terms of sequences, we do actually recommend that you use either the Vibe, the TruthFIFs, or like the FFE sequences to do your sort of imaging. Within the user's guide, we actually do provide a recommended scan parameters that we would recommend you do run all these tests with. But of course, you can also make a couple of edits and adjustments to it depending on what sorts of tests you want to run with the Phantom.
Perfect. Thank you for your answers to those questions, Joanne. We're not going to take any more questions. Some of our questions we've skipped over because I believe they were covered in Joanne's presentation. If there are any that we haven't got round to, Joanne will try and get you an answer by email. So if you would like to rewatch this webinar or recommend it to a colleague, it is going to be available shortly on physicsworld.com. Just click on the audio and video tab and go to webinars. So on behalf of our presenter, thank you for joining us today, and we will call this the end of the webinar. So enjoy the rest of your days.